And we are going to talk today about mastering the mid-market, lessons for building and selling into scaling enterprises. And those words all matter. The scaling piece is particularly important, and these are mini enterprises. So let's get into it. This is a topic I'm really passionate about, but I think it's a topic that is particularly important in the current environment. So you may be asking, what is a mid-market customer or a mid-market account? What does that look like? And the truth is, everybody defines these things very differently. I have run sales teams that sell into the mid-market in a variety of different types of companies. And these definitions can be very unique, very precise based on your business. And generally what you want to do is think about drawing the lines around what matters to your buyer and when their behavior changes. So you'll see I've included some very basic guidelines here. These are not true for every business, but generally what we're talking about is companies that fall into this like 200 to 1,000 or 200 to 2,000 employee range. In revenue, they may range from 10 million to $1 billion in run rate revenue. It's a huge swath of companies in this mid-market. And, I've seen this from a lot of angles. So today I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Vanta. We ourselves fall into the bottom end of this mid-market band. We're just north of 300 employees. We're a scaling mid-market company today. We're growing out of that SMB phase of being a small startup to a scaling mid-market company. Our customers also fall into this range. And prior to joining Vanta about 7 months ago as the CRO, I was running the mid-market team at Twilio. And at Twilio, the mid-market business alone was more than a $400 million business just on its own, selling into these companies at the middle of the market. And there are a lot of reasons this is important, and it's a particularly timely topic because the reality of the market is shifting. And I'm sure you all are experiencing this. You're feeling it. You are understanding what it feels like out in the market with the economy, putting extra pressure on startups and on smaller companies. One of the most effective strategies you can engage in a downturn as you take your products to market is start to think about how to sell those products to slightly larger companies, move a bit up market. And the reason for that is that in a downturn, it's laws of physics, larger companies are going to be a bit more stable. They are going to be able to weather the storm. They certainly typically have enough cash on hand to weather a year or two downturn. And they make great targets, particularly if you're selling a product that's going to help them be more efficient, that's going to help them solve problems, but hire less humans and save cost. In a downturn, those are the things that mid-market companies are going to be looking for. So these are great targets. It's the right time to start to think about how to sell to them. But that is not always a super straightforward thing to do. So what I am here to tell you about today is some of the pain and some of the challenges that I have faced in selling into these companies myself as an AE and also guiding my team to sell to mid-market companies. Now, the cool thing with mid-market companies is that they're not just buying small things. They're not just doing low dollar value deals. These companies can spend millions of dollars and do spend millions of dollars on SaaS tools, on products, on the things that you might be interested in selling them. Now, as you do that, you're going to encounter some really interesting challenges that start to pop up as companies get bigger. And that challenge number one on the list is customers start to buy like enterprises. And what does that mean? Well, it can mean a lot of different things. And, enterprises buy in a very heavy way. The traditional idea of what a enterprise buyer is going to do is engage a variety of stakeholders, engage a variety of folks dedicated to purchasing. So you're typically looking at folks who have supply chain or procurement in their title. You're going to have people vetting the security of your solution. You've got folks dedicated to making sure an enterprise is reducing risk. So things like these security reviews actually become the norm. And if you sold into enterprise, I am sure you have gotten more than one of these really gnarly, like hundreds of questionnaires in a very old school Excel spreadsheet that your buyer sends over. Sometimes this happens at the very end of the deal. You get to the finish line and they're like, oh, by the way, you've actually got to pass the security review, and here's the spreadsheet. And they toss it over like, no big deal, just check it off. And as particularly as like a SaaS company, you may go through that spreadsheet and it can read like a foreign language. The language of what they're asking may not be applicable. It may not reflect the way your technology works. These can be really gnarly documents. And what's not obvious on the surface is that hidden in those hundreds or even thousands of questions in a spreadsheet will be things that if you answer incorrectly could kill your deal. And those things often pop up by surprise at the very end of a deal. Typically, these enterprises will have folks dedicated to these security reviews. They look at your answers, and if it looks like you don't know what you're doing, you suddenly cannot do business with that company. Or at a minimum, they're going to ask you to jump through more hoops, maybe do pen testing, maybe do a variety of other things to give them some assurance that you know how to run your business in a secure way. This is actually the origin story behind Vanta. So my CEO, Christina Cassiopo, was the PM behind Dropbox Paper. And as she was building Paper, they were starting to talk about strategies to bring it to market and how they were going to introduce existing Dropbox customers to this new product. And they had this great idea of like, well, let's just like give a version of this to all of our Dropbox customers. And in doing so, get them some exposure to what it is. We could upsell. And so they started doing that. And she very quickly got a knock on her virtual door from legal. And legal said, what are you doing? We have not yet vetted the security of this product. Like, it doesn't meet our contractual requirements to our customers. And by the way, like, have you gotten a SOC 2 for it? And she very quickly went and Googled, what is a SOC 2? And that's what a lot of companies do. And that led her down the path later in her career of creating Vanta to help companies get their first SOC 2 report and help them solve these gnarly questions and processes that enterprises expect when you sell into them for proving that you're secure, proving your security posture. So the reality for a mid-market company is that they are growing into this enterprise motion. They are coming up the stack. They might be hiring their first person who is responsible for vetting vendors and making sure those vendors are secure and compliant. They certainly are getting folks engaged to look at contract terms and make sure they negotiate a great deal with you. And what can be really interesting is that the folks engaged in that exercise to ensure that you as a vendor are what they need you to be might change over the course of a deal because a mid-market company is scaling so fast. So, the requirements you set out with may not be the requirements you end up with. And not being prepared for these challenges is the single best way to not have predictable revenue and not succeed in the mid-market. So let's talk about challenge number 2, and that is multiple stakeholder problem. And look, this is a problem in every medium to large size company, but in a mid-market company, it can be even gnarlier. And that is because in a mid-market company, this company is changing, it's growing. They're like every day they're hiring new people as they scale. Sometimes titles are very inconsistent. Like the titles folks have might not make sense. They might not be things that you think are relevant as a stakeholder in whatever business you're trying to close. But in mid-market companies, you'll see that folks often will play roles that don't match their title or roles that are much more wide-ranging than you might suspect. And getting to the heart of who can make the decision to buy is one of the most important things you can do. And you have to do this multiple times throughout your journey and selling to a mid-market company. I have made the classic mistake related to this, which is assuming that because you get somebody on the phone and they're asking you the right questions, that you have your buyer on the phone and that they're the decision maker. And, I made this mistake early in my tenure at Twilio. I was talking to a mid-market company that was like a dental insurance company. And these folks got me on the phone, and this guy was asking all the right questions, and he understood like what the product did. And, we ended up having 3 calls. And, I was like, this is a deal. Like, I'm forecasting this thing to close. I'm saying, like, there's a project here. This is happening. They're going to buy. And on the 3rd call, I realized that I had never really clarified what this person's role was in the org. And their title was kind of vague. It was like one of those titles where it's hard to tell exactly what their job is. And I did not do the work to uncover exactly what their role was in the project. And when I did finally uncover that after being challenged by my manager, what I uncovered was that basically the person I was talking to was an admin to the CEO. And look, admins are fantastic, but they're definitely not the decision maker. And what I really came to on that call was I had pulled in these resources. I had my SE on the phone, and ultimately this person was just collecting information, and there wasn't even an active project yet. And they certainly weren't the decision maker. So, I did luckily end up getting a deal with this business. Now, it did not close in the next 30 days like I was telling my manager that it would. It ended up closing about 9 months later. So figuring out who those stakeholders are and how they make sense is a big part of the process. And it may not be clear. So the person you're talking to on your first call, second call, they might not even know who the stakeholders are. So dig deep and ask the right questions there. And that leads me to challenge 3, which is often mid-market companies, they really don't know what they don't know. And this can be one of the hardest parts of selling into this messy middle of the mid-market. So, the beauty of an SMB is you're typically selling into a much smaller company. It's very clear. You kind of typically might have founders. They'll be able to direct you into exactly the folks who matter. Often decisions can be made by a single person in an SMB. And at the other side of the spectrum is the enterprise, where for a fact going in, you've got a bunch of stakeholders, but typically the people you talk to will be able to tell you, like, here's what our process looks like to buy products like yours. Here are some of the people that are going to have to approve that. Here's who owns the budget. None of those things are typically clear in this messy middle market. And the person you get on the phone first not only will probably only be able to tell you some of that information, they just might not know. And that answer to who are the stakeholders for this, how do you approve a software purchase, are probably going to change over the course of a few months. Every time you talk to them, new folks might be engaged. I had another very large multi-million-dollar deal like this, where we had closed the first deal with the company when they were in the SMB phase of their growth. They were very small, and we were selling them a simple text messaging solution. A technical leader bought the product and started using it, drove up usage, becomes a multi-million-dollar engagement with this company. So come a year later, we start to re-engage, and my team was telling me, like, no problem, we got this. They're super happy with us. It's going fine. We know they're spending a lot of money, but like they're gonna renew. It's no problem. Well, then we started getting like outreach from all sorts of folks, and they were folks we had never talked to before. And there were titles in the mix like corporate development and strategic this and that, and definitely security people. And in that outreach, it was not clear who these people were, whether they could actually approve or not approve the purchase. and how this was going to go end to end and who our decision maker was. So over the course of a 4-month negotiation, we went from a situation where we had sold this deal initially to one person in a small SMB to a situation where we had almost 30 people engaged in the deal. And even within that group, we had to clarify several times who is the ultimate approver for this budget and who's going to decide. We had like warring factions of, a technical decision maker who was very happy with the solution from a technical perspective, but a new strategic sourcing lead who felt like they should get a bigger discount and go and churn and go to a competitor because that competitor was saying they could do it cheaper, but the technical lead saying, no, this is what I want to use. So trying to get them to talk to each other was part of the challenge of getting that deal done and working out like which one of them got to make the final call. So figuring out what that process even looks like is a big part of the battle. So I'm here to give you the playbook, how you impose order in the chaos, and how you handle these chaotic situations in these rapidly scaling and changing companies. So your mid-market playbook really starts with, on this challenge 1, customers that start buying like enterprises. There are a couple of key things you can do to really make sure that you are ahead of the curve. One is to get your security certifications in order. Get your SOC 2 report, have that attestation done, have these boxes checked. And this is going to be a different set of standards depending on who you're trying to sell to. So do your diligence and understand, if you're selling in the European Union, you probably need to be thinking about GDPR and how it's relevant to your customer data. There are many of these out here. I'm sure you all are dealing with HIPAA. If you're dealing with EPHI, then you're going to be thinking about how you keep that secure and compliant. So figure out which of the compliance standards are relevant to you. Get those processes well underway. They can be multi-month processes. And be proactive about using those reports and those certifications to your advantage. So if you bring those to your buyer up front and say, hey, we've already thought about this, here's our proof, they are going to take you very seriously and look at you very differently than others in the space. Particularly if you're a small company, this is a great way to be able to punch above your weight class. The second is to have a really great mutual success plan in place. So this is about writing it down. This is not necessarily like an internal tool that you're going to write down and share with your CEO or with your team or your manager to say, here are the steps to closing business with this company. This is about having a shared document with your buyer, with your champion, that documents the steps on both sides that are required to close the partnership. And it's important to frame this as a way to ensure mutual success. And if you set up that mutual success together, they will be bought in and they will give you feedback on what's missing from that list. So don't be shy. This does not have to be super elaborate. You want to capture what is like really core and what matters to their business and what are the steps they have to follow to succeed in making this relationship a real thing. All right. Challenge. When we're out of order, challenge number 3. We'll go challenge number 3 first. Why not? Let's do it. They don't know what they don't know. This is actually a really big one. And with challenge number 3, they don't know what they don't know. You have to help them help themselves. And the best way you can do that is just to ask a lot of really powerful discovery questions. Ask those deep questions about not only what they're trying to solve, but why are they trying to solve this problem? Why did they talk to you in the first place? We are all super busy. That is true for your buyers as well. They don't have that extra time. So if they're on the phone with you and they're willing to entertain a conversation, there's something there that they're trying to grapple with, trying to solve or unblock. Have them get into that with you and make it about their business pain that you're trying to uncover. You got to uncover the urgency. You got to understand like who in the organization cares about solving the problem. Why do they care about solving it? Like, why does it matter? Why does it matter to the leadership team or to the board? What key metrics are you trying to move by working with us? Who else needs to weigh in? And what's the process for purchasing a product like ours? Like, what's your legal process? What do you need to do on compliance? And what makes it really unique selling into mid-market customers in this way is you not only have to ask these questions on the first call, you have to ask them every call. You have to ask your initial contact for help navigating the organization so you can continue to ask these questions of other folks. So what you can do in a mid-market company is ask questions up front. A great rabbit hole to go down with them is, what's your process for purchasing? And you can say, what I've seen from other companies of your size and that are similarly situated is there's typically a long process to get approved by security. Do you have a security team that needs to vet my security posture? And can I get in contact with them so we can start on that process? A lot of times the answer you'll get back is, oh, I don't actually know what those requirements are. Let me go figure that out. By doing that, you're helping your buyer figure out their own purchasing process and then bringing those folks who need to be in that conversation to the table a lot earlier. So help them help themselves. And the multiple stakeholders problem. Really, you have to be multi-threaded. And I think this is one of the hardest things if you're like a founder that's going out to sell your products for the first time, or if you're like one of the first salespeople selling something. The idea here is, don't ever just talk to one person. You want to gather the input of multiple people with your prospect or with the company that you're trying to sell into. The more data you have, the more context you have, the more likely you are to be successful. And qualify those buyers early. Don't make the mistake I made with the dental insurance company of just letting the conversation roll because they're asking all the right questions and saying all the right things. Who is the person? Where do they live in the org? Why do they care about what you're doing together? Understand that, and then figure out who else needs to get engaged. So from a toolbox perspective, you, I am sure, have heard of the Medpic Framework. Get out there and Google it if you have not. Make sure you are asking those right questions in every area. Who cares about this? What's the pain for the business? What are the key metrics? Who else needs to weigh in? Dive deep and you will help your customers succeed, and you will have a much more predictable flow of revenue coming out the backside. Whether you're an early product or a scaled sales team, these concepts still apply. That's the playbook. And I think we're almost up on time, but I think we may have time for a few questions.
Yes, we do. Let me quickly check if we have any questions. Yes, we do have these questions. And Patricia is asking, what is the biggest mistake companies make when selling to enterprises that look minor on the surface, but is detrimental in the terms of compliance? It's a great question.
Yeah, I think it's really just thinking it's a checkbox and not understanding that, like, there's real there's real meat there. And, you know, often like the champion you're dealing with or the initial person you're selling to will not understand themselves what a big deal it is. So, you know, there is really a very standard set of things you can do to address those compliance needs. And part of the reason you hear about SOC 2 a lot is because it's a great like entry level compliance standard. It covers all your basics. It makes sure you've got all the basic policies that you need as a business covered. It makes sure you are securing your infrastructure in the most basic of ways. It sort of checks every box that a security team is going to start to dig into. Access reviews, like making sure that when you offboard folks at your company, that you actually offboard them from all of your systems. It's like all of those basic things contained in a simple standard. So I think if you can really focus on just check all those basic boxes, get your SOC 2 proactively, be out there using, and I think to your question, like really the error in there is thinking like, it's like, I got to meet these standards. I got to get the basics done, but it's more about like, really do this proactively and use it as a selling tool, like compliance and taking your security posture seriously. that's a tool for selling and winning deals. And it's a thing, particularly as a startup, that can differentiate you. So don't treat it as an afterthought. Treat it as something that can be a competitive differentiator versus other similar products.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stevie. And also, we have another interesting question. As a startup, where do you recommend starting, mid-market or enterprise, and why?
This is the perpetual question, and unfortunately, there's no really simple answer that applies to everyone. The truth is, it depends, and it depends on what your product is. So I think that the key to answering this question for yourself is to set it out as a team and define your ideal customer profile. And the process of doing that will lead you down a path of thinking about what is the problem we're solving, um, who has budget to solve these kinds of problems. I think one of the big places startups go wrong is like they come up with a cool idea and they're like, this is great. It seems like something everybody would want. Like, let's just go try to sell it. And then you go experiment and sell it to big companies, sell it to small companies. You got to get really thoughtful about, is this actually a problem that there are folks out there in the world today that they're trying to solve it, and it's something they can actually spend money on, rather than like something that they would go like, oh, that's a good idea, but I would have to think about like how to slot that into my existing world. So can you find some identified budget, tie an ROI to it, and then go sell? And, there are startups that succeed at going into the enterprise first. They do multi-million dollar deals only. And, you really go hard at big deals, big customers. Other companies go SMB first and low dollar value. Neither one of those things is wrong. It really just depends what you're trying to solve. And then you need to make sure you customize your messaging to that ICP, that customer profile that you're going after. So my advice would be, don't try to be everything to everyone. Get really clear for your company on who your target customer is, and then go after that exclusively.
Awesome. And from my side, Stevie, because I have you over here, and it's a pleasure having you. So I see that a lot of startups are actually focusing on product-led growth.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, how does that differ from the traditional processes that we deploy for growth? So if you can please shed some light on that, that would be awesome.
I am a huge fan right out of the gate. Like, I think, PLG should be a part of many company strategies. And this is another one where you have to really start to question like the typical ways of operating like a sales team and what that means. And I'm a big fan of really setting up PLG to be like the top of your funnel. Give prospects an opportunity to experience your product, and then engage salespeople when they can really provide value on top of that. I think the mistake a lot of companies make here is they think, oh, like PLG can be like a freemium that is just like free, and like, but people really want to talk to salespeople, or they want to talk to a human. The truth is they don't. And PLG can be incredibly efficient because you give folks an opportunity to go as far as they can go without talking to someone. And then you can be thoughtful about how you engage, whether it's customer success or sales in that motion. So it does have to be different. You have to really shift the mindset of the work you do to customer success and customer enablement, as opposed to a more traditional like direct sales approach. So, and you'll find that even though you're thinking about it as success or enablement, those are the things that lead to sales, because then you can think about, how am I helping my prospect get through the funnel or get through the onboarding process? And that's where revenue comes from, as opposed to, I got to get on a call, I got to do a demo and walk through a very traditional process.
Awesome. No, that. Yeah, we have a lot of questions coming in. People are super engaged. Let me just please ask another question. So how did you shift your sales team focus on the mid-market after they got accustomed to selling to SMBs, and did it require to reinvent internal sales processes and reporting processes?
Yes, it does. It does. And it's a gradual thing. I think that, the reality of this for my company, for a lot of companies, the sales cycle in a mid-market company looks very different. It's typically longer. You move from a world of single stakeholder to multiple stakeholders. You've got all these changes we just talked about. And you have to then think about, like, how do you incentivize a team to do those kind of deals and do that work? What you find is if you try to blend like a team that's covering both SMB and mid-market, they're probably just going to go do the SMB deals because they're faster, they're more concrete, and they can kind of churn through them. So one of the first things I did to encourage us to move up market was actually split the team. So I have salespeople doing SMB and I have salespeople doing mid-market. And those are two separate teams. And then you have to think about incentives. Like anytime it's sales, you want to really think about your comp plan and how you're incentivizing people. So one of the first and most concrete changes I made was my SMB team is on a monthly plan because it's very high velocity. It's a short sales cycle. They're turning quick. So we want urgency. I put the mid-market team on a slightly longer period of plan. So they're on a quarterly plan. Their deals still are getting done relatively fast, but I want the time for them to do the right diligence, engage more stakeholders, get thoughtful, and get more contract value, because the contract value as you move up market, I think one mistake folks make is you think, if I'm going to go SMB to mid-market, we've got to totally rebuild the product. Usually not true. There are usually like a few key features that will help you unlock, and it's more about how you sell and how you position. And you will ultimately find you can typically sell the same product for a lot more money to just a larger company.
I'm really the Q&A over here. And also we have another question. How would you recommend to approach a business for them earning a commission from selling your product services to your clients?
Approach a business for them earning a commission. So are you talking, I'm thinking this question is more about like channels or resellers. Is that sort of what we're getting at, Tyler?
Yeah, I think I
B2B2C. Okay. Yes. I totally see what you're saying. And this is interesting is it can go into channels and resellers. It can also be like, this is really the Twilio model of like B2B2C. I think, again, it really boils down to incentives in this world and why, if you're working with a reseller or you're working in a B2B2C situation, why does that middle participant, the middle B, what makes them care about doing that business? What is their incentive to get it done? I think that one of the tempting fallacies here is I think companies go into business and they think, oh, this is great. Like we should approach these resellers or these channel partners. And our product is a really obvious addition to their product set. And then you do the partnership, you put all this effort in place, and then like it's live and no deals come in. And I've seen this more times than I care to admit. And ultimately that happens because what didn't get appreciated is that reseller partner or the party in between has 1,000 different things going on. They've got tons of partners. They're much more mature. They're much bigger. They've got tons of partnerships already. Their sales team is probably selling lots of things. When you do that, what I have found is, one, you got to get the incentives right. You got to give them a reason to really care and a reason that is strategic for them. And then two, you got to really focus on enablement. And that can be everything from just ground up, getting into the trenches with their sales team and enabling them and making sure they understand the value of the product and the partnership, making it worth their while. So making sure they're incentivized to actually sell it as one of the many things in their portfolio. It really is like there's a whole ground game you have to play there to make sure that they care and they have the right incentives and they're educated about what it is. You can't just assume, and then make it as simple as possible for them to succeed.
And Stevie, there's another question by Pat. She says, what are some of the indicators that an early stage startup can measure themselves by to assess their readiness to start selling to bigger companies?
It's I wish there were magic bullets here. I do think, you want to check some of the boxes, the obvious boxes of like compliance and security are a big one. You want to be able to know that you can meet that minimum threshold. You want to be able to meet some of the minimum thresholds for like terms and contracting. Like usually you're selling to a bigger company, they're going to want to negotiate with you on price and they're going to want certain terms for payment. But the truth is those are all like boxes you should be able to check. Often the only way to know is to try. That's the unfortunate reality, is get really smart, do a bunch of market research, and get out there and test your pitch, frankly. That is the single best way. And you will start to identify patterns of what works and what doesn't. Take that back, create a formalized structure to feed that feedback both to the leadership team and to your product team. Because sometimes you'll have a product that's like so close for a larger upmarket profile, but there's maybe one or two features that are blocking deals. And once you unlock those, then you'll start to see a pattern of success and what's working. So get really tight on the patterns of what works, get really tight on your ideal customer profile, and then just get out there and pitch over and over and over until those patterns become clear and you can unblock.
A lot of sense. So yeah, and as a salesperson, I would love to wrap up this session with a question that I would love to ask by myself, is that what is your advice, because you have huge experience in sales and business development, what is your advice to young salespeople who are ambitious and want to succeed in this line of work? What is your advice? What is that one thing that you would like to just
my one piece of advice, one, just get a lot of at-bats. And what I mean by that is put yourself in a situation to have like a high volume of experience. And, I think a lot of people are really turned off by like cold calling or like going the SDR route, starting there, but I cannot recommend it more highly. I had a great mentor, a previous COO, and this was the big thing he would push with our team was get at bats, get in the room, shadow people, listen, make a lot of calls. And the more at bats you give yourself, the more you're going to figure out your own style. The truth is there's no one right way to sell. There's not one right way to succeed. I've managed huge teams. And if you look across those teams, tons of different styles, tons of different backgrounds. I dropped out of college originally. I did finish in the pandemic 25 years later. I'm a single mom. Like, I don't fit the profile of a CRO. I started as a pro video gamer. Like, that's the beauty of this line of work, is that anyone can learn it and get good at it, but you got to practice. You got to get those at bats. And if there's one area of skill I would focus on, it's discovery. Get really good at listening and asking super insightful questions. It really just boils down to being curious. Get super curious, practice those questions. If you nail discovery, you will be a fantastic salesperson.
Awesome. And really enjoyed the session, Stevie. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I'm going to urge the attendees to come and join the session, that we have on the main stage. And Stevie, once again, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.